It was definitely a whole lot of fun working with Savoir Adore at WFUV in Studio A just this past week. And really some of the nicest people, just genuinely nice people I've ever met. Super excited, super enthusiastic, and happy to be there. And they ended up giving us a stellar performance with some really great songs, in my opinion. So more than happy to make the audio sound the best I possibly can. So figured making a video of the mastering for our videos is probably more beneficial to anyone who's watching compared to just a written blog post. Here we have a tape bounce. Recorded this, mixed it live to 2-track, also recorded it to 1/4-inch tape, and then bounced the tape into the digital domain so that we can work with it. And this DAW I'm using here, Audition CS 5.5. You know, the first thing I've started playing with lately is the use of volume envelopes to get about a 2 decibel range with which I can work to try and make sure that areas of the song that you want to have a little more impact, you know, you can do that. Also any leveling, like you can see here in the very beginning, there's a long intro that's substantially quieter compared to the rest of the song. And I don't think that the majority of average listeners could tell you if a decibel difference, you know, a 2 decibel difference change had happened, but I do think they can feel it. And so let me load it up and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, you can see here this envelope looks just like, you know, most envelopes do. You know, just a line graph, and allows you to make changes in amplitude. And, you know, the 10% or 9% difference really isn't a whole lot. It just gives you a little extra oomph. For example, by reducing the overall level or setting the overall level down at 90%, you know, that lets us effectively apply gain to the areas like the intro, areas like this transition after a bit of silence or a wind down, and then, you know, continue building the song and make it bigger as it goes out to the close. This is going to be, you're going to hear the raw mix, unmastered mix with some volume envelope happening. Let's go ahead and apply that envelope now. And if you were watching the waveform, you see it's a very subtle difference, but I think that difference matters, much like when mixing, you know, a series of very small decisions can amount to a much greater change when all is said and done. So, for me, my next step, or my first step, depending on how you look at it, is to play with the frequency balance. You know, get an equalizer up. In this case, using a linear phase equalizer created by Nugent, and I really like it because it lets you split into mid-side processing. You can process your mids separately from your side channels, so information that's, you know, equal on both the left and right channels forms your mid, and the difference turns into the side channels. I find this useful when you have material that's panned out. You can focus in on things like your kick and your snares and your, you know, hopefully your lead vocals. All that stuff generally is in the middle.
painted in the sky, all that's in your eye. Now, not the same. Watch it tumble down, falling all around, around. Can you stand watching it undo all that's made of you? You can stay and I will wake you. I will wake you in.
So to my ears, we're really only talking about 2 or 3 decibels here, 2 or 3 decibels there, if that. To me, the cut around 280 removes, you could say it removes some of the body, but it also allows the clarity to cut through a little more. It makes the mix a bit lighter to me, which I thought was appropriate for the material. And the high-end boost, it's a 2.5 decibel boost around 3K. To me, that really allows the articulation in the vocal cut through, and it takes the mix out of the closet, so to speak. I'll just A/B that here for you.
In the morning you can stay. See what you thought was yours could never be had. Oh, take a look around, try to understand that.
Again, it's a linear phase EQ, so they're, the types of distortions that typical EQs may introduce, phase degradation, doesn't really happen with this. So to me, it sounds very clean. It does have a sound, but it's a very clean and transparent one, and definitely what I like to work with for this application. Let's go on. I got this other EQ, Baxter EQ. It's a shelving EQ, and it also lets you split into mid-side processing. And I think I use this just to push up a little more clarity. Let's see. Really nice device. You can see we're in mid-side mode here. So the top row is the mid-channel, bottom row is the side channel. What are we doing? We're doing a 1.5 dB shelving boost at 1.8 kilohertz, and then 0.5 decibel boost to the overall mid-channel. Let's see how that plays out for us. A little more cut for me. Yeah, so playing with these two together, I mean, I usually start over here, maybe go through it and end up tweaking back, making changes again. Very cyclical decision process for me. The next thing, the next thing, the effects chain anyway, I didn't necessarily do it next, but I really like this plugin, the Stereoizer by Nugent. It's a really cool plugin. It lets you, add depth and stereo width in a variety of different ways. Most plugins of this type have what you call linear width, and it lets you expand and use phase to make things seem wider, make them more narrow, but the Nugent plugin, it has 2 other types. It has, on the left, it has intraaural intensity difference, meaning this engine uses the localization principle of loudness differences between your ears or between channels to create a stereo effect, and you can bandwidth restrict it, create upper and lower bounds, and you can play with the width, how much you want to fill in. The other one is intraaural time difference, which recognizes that time of arrival plays a role in how we localize sound. So I'll just put it in and you'll see what it sounds like. my ears, that adds a lot of depth and creates a fill, so to speak. It fills out and enriches, this range here for me. Sometimes with live recordings, we don't have the time or ability to do, layering or anything like that. So sometimes you can have a very LCR mix, left, center, right mix. This plug into my ears helps enhance the final product. All right, so moving on. What else we have next? Let's see. Going to this multiband compressor, I think I was just working on the very. I think there were some sustains, some bass note sustains later on that initially caught my attention, but utilizing a very low ratio of 1-to-1, pretty deep threshold. You can see the attack time is such that I really just measured one of the kick drum transients to make sure we weren't encroaching on them too much, but I wanted to tighten up the bass a little bit, match the gain, the makeup gain, so as to avoid changing the actual balance of low frequencies in the mix altogether. Just wanted to add a little meat to the ultra low frequencies.
You can stay where you are. You can stay where you are.
The next thing is this free plugin by Variety of Sound, I think is what it's called, and it's called Rescue AE. A couple things going on here. It has a mid-side filter, has some stereo width controls. Where is that? Oh yeah, here it is. It has this width control, spreads out the side channel. Also has some rudimentary gain limiting functions. I use it because it has this cool dial called Punch, which I can only imagine is some type of upward expansion. But you can see it's barely over 0. I just like to put this in a touch, in this case, to really make the snare drum and the kick drum crack, especially in the instrumental intro and the re-intro later on.
You can stay. Won't you come here, you know the way.
To me, it gives the snare especially a little more smack. And so I didn't necessarily do each of these things in this order, but the next thing in the signal chain for me, looking at this meter over here, we got the TT dynamic range meter. This is really cool because it gives you peak levels, it gives you RMS levels, and then it gives you your dynamic range, the continuous difference between the peak and the average. And it gives you these indicators. This plugin was actually created to help fight against the loudness war and encourage people to utilize, a broader dynamic range. So as opposed to, say, a 6 or a 6 decibel, 5 decibel dynamic range where, your master's really crushed, maybe 8 is just fine, so.
Won't you come here, you know the way. It's the one you make.
Cool. Let's go on over to this limiter, see what we got here. This is a TC Electronic, very simple limiter. Just started walking up the level. You can see this line here is 3 dB, or -3 rather. So most of our transients are just below that range. So using this just to start walking the gain up, you see makeup gain is enabled, so it's just gonna make up what it, what it reduces, or what your threshold is. You bring the threshold down to -3, it's gonna make up that difference. The attack is longish for a brick wall compressor, around 6 milliseconds, just to preserve some of the transients. Really wanted the transients to be handled by this other limiter here.
Oh, built it in the sky, all that's in your eye. Now, not the same. Watch it tumble down, falling all around, around. Can you stand watching it undo all that's made of you? You can stay where you are.
You may notice that the limiter really isn't even working too hard. It's there's really not a whole lot of gain reduction going on. You'll only see it in places where there's a big smack like this later on, and that's just fine. I don't want to crush it with this limiter. I want another limiter to do which work a little harder. So let's see.
Keep on sleeping. What you think is yours could never be had. Oh, take a look around, try to understand.
And so one thing you might see, you see some overs over here. It's we're taking care of it elsewhere. Since it's actually not clipping just yet, but it's showing us that it will clip if we do nothing about it. So let's get rid of this one. Let's open up the Cert Elliott Mastering Limiter Series 4.
The same. Watch it tumble down, falling all around, around. Can you stand watching it undo all that's made of you? You can stay where you are. I will wake you in the morning. In the morning, you can stay where you are.
You can see we're getting quite a bit of volume out of this. Let me just I'll disable that one and open a new one. Just to show how I might go about playing with these settings to get what I want out of it. Really just listening. I mean, it's terribly distorted now. Just listening to see what sort of attack time will let us get clean transients on the front end.
Oh, built it in the sky, all that's in your eye. Now, not the same. Watch it tumble down, falling all around, around. Can you stand watching it undo all that's made of you? You can stay where you are. I will wake you in the morning. In the morning, you can stay where you are. So don't you worry
So that's about a 6 dB difference right there. Let's turn on clip prevention and pull it up.
It's a day that you never hold on to very long, long. Where we are is see what you thought was yours could never be had. Oh, take a look around, try to understand that it's a day that you never hold on to very long, long. Where we are isn't just a place where everything remains. You can stay where you are.
Alright, so we got to get them at a level. So I'm going to remove this one and just go back to... going to remove this one and go back to the one that we already had. So we've made a lot of small decisions. You know, no single decision drastically changed the mix. But if we bypass the whole rack and then re-enable it, I think you'll hear the aggregate is a pretty big difference.
Until won't you come here, you know the way, it's the one you made. Oh,
And so the final output looked and sounds like this.
won't you come?
So really cool tune, really great people. If you want to buy the album, I'd highly encourage you to do that. There's a video of their performance below, and definitely check them out. Savoir Adore. Hope you enjoyed.